Stephen Squibbs presents this month's board certification tip.
Hello, everybody. And today we are interviewing the 10th person who passed the board certification exam in 2021. We've had an incredible response. Everybody we've asked has agreed graciously to participate. And today we're lucky to have Katherine Katie Johnson, who hails from Jacksonville, Florida. She is with the Zisser Law firm, and the founding member, Elliot Zisser, is instrumental in board certification. I think he might be responsible for the first test we had. Katie, welcome to our little CLE show, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
So my first question is, why the heck did you leave South Florida for Jacksonville?
That's a really great question. I went to Florida State University for undergraduate. And when I made the decision that I wanted to go to law school, I decided that it probably wouldn't be productive for my studies for me to remain in Tallahassee. And I wasn't really quite ready to move back home and be too close to my family, which is a joke. I wish I was. So somehow I landed in Jacksonville, and I have called it home ever since.
I grew up in Miami, left for law school, ended up in West Palm. So I guess similar kind of path. And you graduated in 2012, right?
That's right.
You became a lawyer. And now in 2021, you are a board certified marital family attorney, which puts you in the top 3% of all family attorneys. So congratulations. It's obvious you approach this with zeal of getting it done. And when you hit that level at your age, it's just an amazing accomplishment. So congratulations on this incredible achievement. And I hope the rewards are already being showered down on you, because once you're board certified, there's all kinds of rewards that happen to you, especially your reputation. So we wanted to ask you about the test, because the viewers here, most of them are interested or are taking the test this year. And there's a lot of criticism that it's a hard test. I used to write it. I used to be on the board cert committee. I think it is a very challenging test, but I think it's typically fair. First off, did you think it was a fair experience and tested everything you needed to know to hold yourself as an expert in this field?
I do think it was a fair test. This is actually my second time taking the test, which meant that I was unsuccessful the first time I took the test. So I think if you would have asked me what I thought about the first test, I might not have said that I thought it was that fair. But in actuality, I probably wasn't as prepared as I needed to be. So after putting in the time and certainly having the benefit of going through the process for a second time and somewhat anticipating what to expect and having the study hours behind me from the first time around, I was obviously in a much better position and felt much more prepared. And since I passed, I can say that I thought it was a fair exam.
And thank you for sharing your journey with us. I think if you take this test, you have to assume you're not going to pass it the first time, just because it's a numbers game. And if you look at the passage rate, most people don't, whether it's their first, second, or third time, don't pass it.
Right.
So they give you core and subcore areas, and they say that's what you need to learn. What did you do from there?
So I had the benefit of having a lot of great mentors throughout the process, which is, you haven't asked me yet what I would recommend, but I'm sure you will. And that would be one thing that I would certainly recommend, is anyone interested in going through the process to reach out and try to buddy up with someone who has gone through the experience, and even better if it is in the recent years, because I'm sure the test may have evolved, or procedures and preparations might have come, people might have different approaches and strategies than they did back then. So I received a lot of advice, and something that was recommended to me that I thought was very helpful with my preparations was, in addition to reading, of course, all of the Florida statutes and knowing the factors and being able to spell them inside and out, which I think is kind of common sense, I was told to read all of the Florida law weeklies throughout the last 2 years. And that's something that I did that I felt was really helpful, and especially as it relates to the short answer questions.
So you got the green books or the advanced, there's a way to get them in January, the paperback, if you're really trying.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that shows you patterns, and there are definite patterns in the law. I read every family law appellate case that comes out, and I do that not, you know, to create content. I do that so I can learn the law, and just watching these cases come out again and again, and you see the obvious patterns. I think
Agreed.
it gives you some inside knowledge of the obvious things that are going to show up on the exam. So pay attention to those patterns. The first time you take it, can you like share the differences between the first time and what made you successful the second time?
I think one thing that made me more successful the second time around is I had the motivation that I had already put in the time the first time around. And obviously, I was unsuccessful. And although I thought I was making my study preparations a priority, I found that I didn't. And for example, some advice that someone gave me was, the week before the exam, or at least 2 weeks, block out anything and don't schedule hearings, don't handle your cases, if you have that ability to do so. And I was really good about being routine up until that time. For whatever reason, as family law seems to just happen, you can't control case emergencies. And I ended up getting really just sidetracked and bombarded. And the 2 weeks prior to the exam, when I should have just been finalizing my preparations, I got distracted, I guess is the best way to say it. So second time around, I was not going to make that mistake again twice. And I said, if I'm taking the time out, taking the time away from my family and my kids, then I'm taking this exam and I'm going to pass it, and I'm going to make it a priority, and I'm going to get it done. And that's what I did.
By any chance, did you keep track of how many hours you put into preparing for this test?
So this is something that is unique in that this time around, I was actually preparing for the exam while I was on quote unquote maternity leave. I had a baby just at the end of December. So I was working, but not really working, although I don't think any lawyer can actually say that they have the luxury of taking a maternity leave off or time off, because you can never really step away from your cases. So I was caring for and being responsible for keeping a new baby alive. So I didn't track my time this time around in detail. The first time I took the exam, I know I had more than 100 hours, and I did track my time, and I created a file on my billing software to input my time to keep track, because I was told, I think by Lawrence Stats, that there was statistics that showed that you had to have at least 100 hours in, otherwise you're not going to pass. So I was like, all right. And without a doubt met the 100-hour requirement. And this time around, I didn't keep track of the time, but that's all I did around the clock, and probably 3-hour intervals with taking care of my child.
And obviously it paid off. So congratulations. Did you get an email or a letter or a phone call telling you passed?
I believe I received an email telling me that I had passed.
That must have been a pretty good moment.
It was, and I actually wasn't expecting it, because I know it always falls right around the time. I think it's Labor Day. It's a holiday.
It came out a couple days early this year.
It did, which was nice, because last time you had to wait after the long weekend and to get the news, and it came early, which was a nice surprise.
So when you took the exam the first time and were unsuccessful, did you go review the exam afterwards, or did you take a peek at the answers and the model answers?
So I really wanted to, and had intended on reviewing the model answer, but that was the year when I took it, was when COVID first happened.
Right. And it was really hard.
And there was a little confusion as to whether we were going to be able to do it virtual, whether we had to go in person, and it ultimately ended up where I wasn't able to drive to Tallahassee to review the exam during my pregnancy. So I didn't, but that was something that I really wanted to do, and has been advice and what a lot of people recommended that I do after I didn't pass the first time.
And I think last year, 2 people challenged their grades and actually were successful in passing when they were told they were failed. So it's definitely, I really suggest it if you can do it. And I know COVID times makes everything a little more hectic. I know the test during COVID times, you were monitored. You didn't go to a central place, you did it remotely.
That was
Someone,
stressful, yes.
someone was staring at you through your computer as you took this test. I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but was there a preference of, did you prefer going and traveling live or just doing it from home, being monitored?
I think that they both have pros and cons. I think it was really stressful, just the uncertainty of the technology, whether my exam would upload. My dog started barking in the middle of the exam several times. She hardly ever barks, and she's actually laying at my feet right now, and hopefully she doesn't start barking at the mailman. But I remember in the middle of my exam, something happened and she was going nuts. And so they have strict rules where you can't get out of your chair. So I was scared to get up to like let her out of my room, but I'm yelling at the dog and I didn't know if I was going to get flagged. So I just didn't know how that worked. And that was really scary and probably kind of humorous if someone really was watching me through the eye of my computer.
And you have a French bulldog, right?
I do.
What is your puppy's name?
Her name's Josie.
So Josie helped you study and she monitored your exam.
Yes, but I will say also that it ended up being able to take it from home was, with my personal circumstances, much better because I did just have a newborn baby, and it would have been stressful for me to have to travel out of town, being I'm in Jacksonville, get a hotel. I don't know if I would have done it. And I think that might have been the reason why I actually decided to pull the trigger and take the exam, because I thought it was likely it would be held virtual. Otherwise, I was studying, but I wasn't really fully committed until I thought that was going to be the process.
And speaking with all the people that have passed the test, and you being the last one that we had the chance to chat with, the biggest concern was lack of time to complete the test. What did you think about that?
I agree wholeheartedly with that concern and gripe, I guess is the best way to say it. One thing that I feel the board certification is looking for is a lawyer's ability to develop their arguments and analysis and the level of analysis and the arguments that can be made. And I don't feel like a testing applicant has the ability to really develop those arguments in the strict amount of time, especially with those essays. For me, I felt like I was having to write my answer as I was reading the question. And I know there's the tip, read the call of the question, which I did, but you don't, the fact patterns are so convoluted that you don't, know the twists and the turns of the question. But I felt like I had to write my answer while I was reading the question. And that, I think, is a big reason why why I may have been unsuccessful with the first exam, is that I didn't budget my time appropriately. And so if I felt like if I would have had more time, ultimately I there were other areas of the exam I didn't pass, but that was something that I struggled with, that I was really cognizant this time around that I can only allot that 60 minutes or 30. I don't recall what it was. You have it mapped out how many time per minute per question you can spend. And I was really strict on that. But I do feel like having a little bit more time, even if it was another few minutes per section, would be more fair to the applicants. And
the call to question that you mentioned, that's that little paragraph at the end of the question that actually asks and tells you what you're supposed to be answering. So the thought is go straight there. And then when you read this convoluted fact pattern about Homer Simpson and Marge, or Brad Pitt and Jennifer, or whatever, you'll know where you're going. And instead of just reading what would otherwise be one hell of initial intake of crazy facts.
Correct.
Those essays are crazy. Do you have any other tips that you would like to provide to our folks?
Other tips, I think I did the process the second time around. I didn't have a study buddy per se. I think it would have been helpful if I did, to have someone, to help hold you accountable and to help motivate you, when you want to kind of throw in the towel. But I didn't have that. I was thankful that I had my mentors, and certainly Elliot Zisser at my firm. He was a big reason why I decided to start the process. And, see, he always encouraged me, as did, the others, and Ashley Myers in town and the other lawyers in my area code that have recently passed the exam in the recent years. So I had a lot of motivation and support, but it would have been nice to buddy up with someone, but there just wasn't anyone else my year that I knew well enough to do that with.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your information and giving everybody inspiration. And I always tell people, if I can pass the test, and so, I mean, I think it's a doable test. And even if you don't pass, you're going to make yourself such a better attorney. So why not go, if this is your vocation, don't you want to be the best of it? And how do you become the best of it? Learn it. And even if you don't hit board certification, just by doing this process, I think it definitely makes, I haven't talked to anyone that has studied and, didn't pass, but not one person has said, this going through this has made me a better attorney. They all say that. So just, setting up a system where you're going to go through all this stuff is going to make you better at your craft, whether you're board certified or not. So that alone, I think, makes it worth it. You going to be attending board cert in January?
I unfortunately am going to be out of town. I have my first vacation in a year. So unfortunately, I will not be there this year, but I will definitely be there next year.
Well, you deserve it. And hopefully next year they'll be asking you to speak on a topic.
Well, I would look forward to that.
Katie, thank you so much for your time. And we appreciate you sharing these tips with our audience.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us for this month's edition of Stephen Squibb's Monthly Family Law CLE. We hope to see you again next month. In the meantime, do something that matters. Visit www.eddiestevens.com for more information.